Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. It's hard to remember now, but it wasn't that long ago that Andrew Cuomo was not only the governor of New York, but also a legitimate hero in the Democratic Party. Do you remember that? Cuomo was the governor who legalized marijuana, who expanded Medicare, who passed strict gun control, who destroyed the NRA as a political force. He was the governor who, more than any other person in this country, including Tony Fauci, effectively defended lockdowns, masking, and vaccines. In fact, in the fall of 2020, Cuomo won an Emmy Award for his daily COVID briefings. He was an actual celebrity. He seemed like a future president, and everybody said so. But within weeks of getting that Emmy, it began to fall apart. A number of women came forward to claim that Cuomo had once said impolite things in their presence. By the standards of Andrew Cuomo's many scandals in office, it seemed like nothing. But for reasons they never explained, Democratic leaders of his party in Washington, took this scandal very seriously. They described Cuomo's behavior as sexual harassment, and they called for his resignation. By summer, it had worked. He was out of office and irreparably disgraced. The people who hand out Emmys even took back their award and scrubbed Andrew Cuomo's name from their website. Andrew Cuomo was too immoral to share space with Hollywood actors, and that's pretty immoral. What exactly did Andrew Cuomo do wrong? He outlived his usefulness to the party. That's what he did. He stayed too long. Cuomo was in his 60s. He was white. He was male. He was someone whose demographic profile represented the Democratic Party of the past, not of the future. He talked like a mafia don negotiating garbage contracts. He was a little embarrassing. Because of that, his own people iced him, and they replaced him with someone who looked the part. No one cried when Andrew Cuomo resigned. They just moved on. The Democratic Party is not a sentimental place. It's hard not to think of Andrew Cuomo when you see what is happening to Joe Biden right now. Kamala Harris is certainly thinking about it. Harris was in a suspiciously good mood today. We know this because she was talking about electric school buses again. I love electric school buses, she raved. I just love them for so many reasons. Maybe because I went to school on a school bus. Raise your hand if you went to school on a school bus. Harris was grinning the whole time. And why wouldn't she be grinning? That senile white guy who claims to be her boss is finally going down, 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 down. It's a happy day at Kamala Harris's house. But it's not a happy day at Casa Biden. In fact, this is pretty clearly the beginning of the end for Joe Biden. We can't prove that. The future is unknowable. But holy smokes, it does not look good. And it doesn't look good in a very recognizable way. Somewhere in his basement rec room, drinking a Courvoisier on ice, Andrew Cuomo is chuckling to himself. He's seen this movie before. Joe Biden's own aides keep finding stacks of felonies he's left around the place, in his office, in his car. And instead of throwing this evidence in the fireplace, as under normal circumstances they would, they're sending these documents on to the Justice Department. That's not a good sign. Meanwhile, Biden's attorney general, the most unscrupulous, unethical attorney general this country has ever had, has somehow decided that actually, in order to maintain his unsullied record of nonpartisanship, he's going to have to pass these documents, these stacks of felonies, onto an independent counsel because that always works out well for a sitting president. And by the way, in this case, the independent counsel is a Republican. Good luck, Joe Biden. Happy 80th birthday. Here's Merrick Garland.
On the evening of November 4th, 2022, the National Archives Office of Inspector General contacted a prosecutor at the Department of Justice. It informed him that the White House had notified the archives that documents bearing classification markings were identified at the office of the Penn Biden Center on November 14th, pursuant to Section 600.2b of the Special Counsel Regulations. I assigned U.S. Attorney Lausch to conduct an initial investigation. On December 20th, President Biden's personal counsel informed Mr. Lausch that additional documents bearing classification markings were identified in the garage of the president's private residence in Wilmington, Delaware. This morning, President Biden's personal counsel called Mr. Lausch and stated that an additional document bearing classification markings was identified at the president's personal residence in Wilmington, Delaware.
They got Joe Biden. His own people got Joe Biden. But they don't want to wreck the party in the process. You following this? So the Department of Justice knew on November 4th that Joe Biden had committed crimes. November 4th was 4 days before a pivotal midterm election. So naturally, the DOJ didn't issue a press release about it. They didn't dispatch the FBI to raid Biden's home in Rehoboth and root through Dr. Jill's underwear drawer. No chance of that. Biden may be a terrible president, but he's still a Democrat. It's not like he's orange. So Merrick Garland, who is, and we cannot emphasize this enough, a soulless hack who will do anything the Democratic Party requires of him. Merrick Garland kept the news secret long enough to keep other Democrats out of the blast zone. Why hurt everybody else? They're just trying to hurt one guy. It's Joe Biden. So it wasn't until today that we knew Biden had been stashing state secrets in his Corvette. Here's Fox's Peter Ducey.
Okay. Classified material next to your Corvette. What were you thinking?
Let me, I'm going to get a chance to speak on all this, God willing, soon. But as I said earlier this week, people, and by the way, my Corvette's in a locked garage, okay? So it's not like you're sitting out in the street.
So
but anyway,
was in a locked garage.
Yes, as well as my Corvette. But as I said earlier this week, people know I take classified documents and classified material seriously. I also said we're cooperating fully and completely with the Justice Department's review. As part of that process, my lawyers reviewed other places where documents in from my time as vice president were stored, and they finished the review last night. They discovered a small number of documents of classified markings in storage areas and file cabinets in my home and my personal library. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn. This was done in the case of the Biden Penn Center. The Department of Justice was immediately, as was done, the Department of Justice was immediately notified, and the lawyers arranged for the Department of Justice to take possession of the document.
So that kind of answers that question. If you're still wondering where there is an organized effort within the White House to hurt Joe Biden, all you need to know is this: his staff keeps putting him out there in public to talk, which of course he can't do. He can barely read a prepared statement. Notice they did not do that during the last presidential campaign in 2020 because they knew it wouldn't help and they wanted the White House. And it helps even less now, but they're doing it. Why are they doing that now? Well, here's a guess. Right after the midterm elections in November, Joe Biden made it clear he had no plans to step aside and make way for Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama. I'm thinking of running again, he said, and he seemed to mean it. Oh, he shouldn't have said that. Next thing you know, he's got a special counsel crawling around his life, armed with subpoena power and a big staff and a big budget. Well, that's how things work in Washington, they'll tell you. Oh, no, it's not. No, it's not. Not unless you have no choice. If you're the President of the United States, a special counsel is the last thing you want. Why? Because you have no idea where that investigation will go. Ask Bill Clinton. He's still mad about it. And that's why there was no special counsel appointed when Hunter Biden's laptop proved that the Biden family was selling influence to the Chinese government. That's why no special counsel ever interviewed Tony Bobulinski. Because that was all before Joe Biden suggested he might run again and thwart the ambitions of the next generation of Democratic candidates. So Joe Biden is in very serious trouble tonight. But so potentially is the University of Pennsylvania, which paid Joe Biden $900,000 for doing essentially nothing. Why would Penn do that? Well, we can't say for sure, but we did notice that as soon as the university paid off Joe Biden, Penn began collecting tens of millions of dollars a year from donors in China. What was that? Maybe the special counsel will get to the bottom of it. We sure hope so. Meanwhile, everyone in Washington is pretending all of this is normal. They know it's not normal, but they're too afraid to say otherwise, except for Hank Johnson. Hank Johnson is not afraid. Hank Johnson is too dumb to be scared. Hank Johnson is the congressman from Atlanta who once famously worried that the island of Guam might, quote, capsize if too many people stood on one side of it. So Hank Johnson is a confirmed non-genius, but he knows a setup when he sees one. Watch this.
I'm suspicious of the timing of it. I'm also aware of the fact that things can be planted on people. Places and things can be planted. Things can be planted in places and then discovered conveniently. That may be what has occurred here. I'm not ruling that out.
So we laughed at Hank Johnson when he said Guam might capsize. We're not laughing at him now. The classified documents that Joe Biden, quote, stored in his garage and left at the Penn Center have been floating around for a full 6 years since Joe Biden left the vice president's office in January of 2017. So it's fair to assume they've been moved around a lot, but they're suddenly surfacing now, right after the midterm election? Why is that? No one has even attempted a convincing explanation. Instead, the media is pretending to argue that it's not a big deal in the first place that Joe Biden stored classified documents near his Corvette because he admitted doing it when he got caught. And if you admit you've committed a crime, it's not a crime. Watch.
There is another key difference between the cases, though. In Biden's case, his attorneys reported the discovery and cooperated by turning them over immediately. That was not the case, of course, with Trump.
So in the Mar-a-Lago case, that really does appear to be a much more complicated case.
Of course, we're seeing a very big difference in what the Biden White House is doing around this and what Trump has done.
Night and day. You have the inadvertent, we don't even know if Biden had anything to do with it.
There are important distinctions between this and the swirl of controversy around Donald Trump and the documents at Mar-a-Lago.
What you see in that documents case is a textbook example of the best possible way of handling the discovery of government documents after leaving office that should have been returned before leaving office. What you see is the exact opposite of Donald Trump's behavior.
These people are so filthy. If their team invaded Poland, they'd defend it. They'll say literally anything. This is the exact opposite of Donald Trump's behavior. All right, Larry O'Donnell. What they're forgetting is that the Trump raid took place in August, not that long ago, and a lot of people still remember the details from it. Trump and his lawyers met with federal investigators and showed them the classified documents that had been stored at Mar-a-Lago. And the FBI told Trump's lawyers, hey, put a lock on the door of the storage room. So they did. Then, when Trump's attorneys volunteered that there were more classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, volunteered, including the famous cocktail napkin, the FBI showed up with guns. And everyone knows that, including everyone you just saw in the clip. They are lying. And that's a problem because they're trying to obscure the saddest fact of modern life, which is there's now an obvious double standard in American justice. And that means we have no justice at all. That's a tragedy for this country. It'll be a long time before we recover from it. Joe Biden is partly responsible. He helped introduce this corruption into our system. And in one of those weird twists of fate that was probably inevitable but still feels like actual justice, Joe Biden is about to suffer greatly for it. Subscribe to the Fox News YouTube channel to catch our nightly opens, stories that are changing the world and changing your life. From Tucker Carlson tonight.